She entered the restaurant with firm steps and a look of contempt. He wore designer clothes, sunglasses, and the kind of posture that made it clear he thought he was better than everyone around him. When the waiter showed her a table in the popular area, close to the balcony, she laughed mockingly. Me? Sitting there? With those kind of people? The surrounding customers looked at each other, embarrassed by the woman's tone. But the waiter remained polite. What she didn't know was that simple waiter she humiliated with such arrogance was, in fact, the real owner of the restaurant, someone who preferred to serve anonymously, observing who entered with their heart in the right place. And that night, she would discover the hard way that luxury without humility is just vanity in disguise. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel because this story will show you that people's true value is not measured by the table they sit at. It was late afternoon in the Salle restaurant, one of the best-known places on the north coast of Florianopolis. The glass windows reflected the sunset over the sea, and the smell of fresh food mingled with the distant sound of waves crashing against the rocks. The restaurant had two distinct areas: the main dining room, with air conditioning, fine glasses, and a privileged view, and the popular area, open and airy, with simple wooden tables and rustic decor. Most customers preferred the popular area, where the atmosphere was more relaxed and the service was closer. But there were those who turned up their noses at the simple. And that's exactly what happened when Viviane Cardoso, a businesswoman in her early 40s, walked through the front door. High heels, expensive perfume, and an expression that seemed to have forgotten what it was like to smile at someone normal. She carried a cell phone in her hand and a designer bag slung over her arm. "Good afternoon, ma'am," the waiter said, smiling. "Welcome to Salle. How many people are there for a table?" "One," she replied, looking around impatiently. "But I want a good table with a sea view." The waiter, André, a man of about 50, with a calm look and soft speech, consulted the tablet. "The tables with a view are currently occupied, ma'am. But I can offer you a table on the balcony. The breeze is pleasant, and the service is the same." Viviane frowned, as if she had heard an insult. "Balcony?" he repeated, laughing contemptuously. "You're kidding, aren't you? I'm not going to sit with those people." Some nearby customers heard. André maintained his posture. "Ma'am, it's a comfortable table, and the menu is the same as in the main dining room. I promise you'll be well served." "That's not enough," she replied, crossing her arms. "I'm used to a different kind of service." André took a deep breath. It wasn't the first time I'd seen someone like that. People who measure respect by the value of clothes, not by the value of actions. The restaurant was packed, and reservations for the main dining room were closed. Even so, André tried to solve it. "We can put you on the waiting list, ma'am." Viviane snorted. "Waiting list?" she asked sarcastically. "I don't even wait to be served at a bank, let alone sit down at a restaurant." She took out her cell phone and started typing messages, muttering, "I knew this place was overrated. A restaurant that makes important clients sit with tourists in flip-flops. How absurd." André just listened, without interrupting. The rest of the team watched from afar, uncomfortable. The hostess approached, but he made a discreet gesture with his hand, indicating that he would take care of the situation. In a calm voice, he said, "Ma'am, can I offer you a drink while you wait?" "I don't want drinks. I want respect," she replied, raising her voice. "I don't think you know who you're dealing with." Some eyes began to turn to the scene. The uncomfortable silence grew. But André, instead of getting angry, just smiled slightly. "You're right," he said. "I may not know who you are, but I know very well who I am. And for that very reason, I will guarantee that you will be treated with dignity, regardless of the table you sit at." Viviane was silent for a moment, confused. I didn't expect that answer. He didn't humble himself, but he didn't confront her either, and that was strangely disarming. She began, unsure of what to say. "I just want something worth what I pay." "And that's exactly what you'll get," André replied. "It's the respect every client deserves." She sighed, looked around again, and reluctantly accepted. "Okay, take me to that balcony, but make it quick." Of course, he replied, smiling. This way, please. As they walked, the sound of the sea intensified, and the sunset dyed the sky golden. The balcony was full of families laughing, children playing, couples toasting. Viviane looked at it all with a mixture of discomfort and disbelief. Is this it? She asked indignantly. This looks like a picnic. André adjusted his chair and replied calmly. Sometimes, madam, the flavor of life is exactly where we least expect it. She sat down with a look of disdain, but deep down there was something in that sentence that made her think, if only for a second. From the counter, some employees exchanged glances. They knew that André was more than just a waiter. He was the undercover owner of the restaurant, a man who made a point of being on the service floor. Once a week to observe people and remind everyone of the value of humility. But that night, he wasn't just watching. He was about to teach an arrogant woman a lesson she would never forget. The sea breeze blew gently over the balcony of the Sol y Sal restaurant, bringing the smell of fresh fish and grilled rosemary. The conversations were cheerful. The laughter mingled with the sound of the waves, and everything seemed peaceful. Until Viviane Cardoso started complaining. She sat with an impatient look, drumming her fingers on the table. He looked at the plain steel cutlery, the paper napkin, and let out an audible sigh. Is this what you call a pleasant atmosphere? He muttered aloud. It looks like a bar with a view. A lady at the next table, who was eating silently with her husband, gave him a disapproving look. Viviane noticed and rolled her eyes. What's up? Have you ever heard anyone complain about bad service? The waiter Raphael, a young and friendly boy, approached with the notepad. Good afternoon, ma'am. What can I get you to start? We have some fresh ceviche that just came out. No, thank you, she interrupted. I don't eat raw food. Bring me something decent, like risotto. And quickly, please. Of course, Raphael replied politely. Would you like something to drink in the meantime? A glass of white wine, but a good brand. None of those cheap bottle options. Raphael calmly wrote it down and walked away. In the distance, André, the oldest waiter, and true owner of the restaurant, watched everything. There was no anger in his gaze, just attention. He had learned over the years that arrogant people are simply those most lacking in humility. While waiting, Viviane took out her cell phone and started recording stories. Guys, look at this, he said, filming the balcony. They said it was a fancy restaurant, but it looks like a beach bar. The view is beautiful, but the rest? Disappointing. The employees glanced at each other discreetly, unsure whether to laugh or cringe. Some customers started whispering, but André continued to watch calmly, without intervening. Raphael returned with the wine and placed the glass on the table. Viviane took it, smelled the contents, and raised her eyebrows. Is that the expensive wine? It's the House Sauvignon Blanc, ma'am. Imported, 2021 vintage. She murmured, looking at the label. Never heard of it. I bet they put a cheap wine in the wrong bottle. Raphael took a deep breath, still, maintaining a respectful tone. I can exchange it if you wish. It's no use, he replied, dismissing it. I just want the dish to arrive quickly. While waiting, a little boy of about 7 years old at the next table dropped his juice and wet the floor a little. Viviane stood up abruptly, her expression one of indignation. Oh, great. Now even a clumsy child can ruin my dinner, he said loudly, drawing attention. The boy's mother apologized, embarrassed. Forgive me, madam, he got carried away, and teach your son to behave. That's the least you can do, Viviane replied dryly. This isn't a playground. The woman lowered her head, embarrassed. André watched the scene, and this time he got up from the nearby table where he was taking notes. He approached slowly, with a cloth in his hands, and began to clean the floor. It's okay, ma'am, he said, looking at the child's mother. Accidents happen. Viviane watched him impatiently. And you're going to leave it like that? Without scolding? Here, madam, André replied calmly. We don't scold those who make mistakes unintentionally. We help clean up. The sentence hung in the air like a silent slap. Some customers hid their smiles. Viviane looked away, uncomfortable. A few minutes later, her dish arrived. Raphael placed the risotto in front of her, but she didn't even thank him. He picked up his fork, took a spoonful, and made a face. "Horrible," he said, pushing his plate away. "It's unsalted and the rice is hard. Is that your famous standard?" Raphael tried to keep his tone professional. "I can ask the kitchen to redo it, ma'am." "Do it, and please have someone try it before bringing it to me." The boy nodded and took the plate back, visibly dejected. André intercepted him on the way. "Everything is fine. She said the risotto was bad, but it's the same dish we served to 20 people today. They all loved it." "I know," André replied, taking the plate. "Let me take the next one myself." Raphael frowned. "But you—" "Yes?" André interrupted with a slight smile. "Myself. I think it's time she discovered the true flavor of what we serve here." In the kitchen, he calmly remade the dish. As he stirred the rice in the pot, the other cooks watched him in silence. "Are you going to reveal yourself?" one of them asked. "Maybe," André replied. "Sometimes certain people need a mirror to see what they really are." When she finished, she cleaned the edges of the plate, arranged the decorations, and, with her apron still simple, left the kitchen towards the balcony. The eyes of the employees followed him expectantly. At the table, Viviane was impatiently fiddling with her cell phone. When he looked up and saw the older waiter approaching with the plate, he raised his eyebrows. "I hope it's edible this time," she said sarcastically. André calmly placed the plate on the table and replied, "I hope that this time you can savor what really matters." She frowned, confused. "And what would that be?" He just smiled. "Respect," he replied, before walking away. The hall fell silent, and for the first time, Viviane had no answer. The sound of the fork hitting the plate was the only noise heard after André left the table. For a moment, she stood there, watching the risotto that had just been brought in, still steaming. The presentation was impeccable. Loose grains, perfect creaminess, intense aroma of herbs and lemon. But what bothered her most wasn't the food. It was the way that waiter had answered him. "I hope you can savor what really matters." The phrase echoed in her head like a riddle. She picked up her fork and tried a small portion, reluctantly. And to his surprise, the taste was perfect. The rice was cooked to perfection, the seasoning was balanced, and the citrus touch harmonized with the cheese. But the more he ate, the more his stomach churned, and not because of the food. It was a shame. With each spoonful, he remembered the words spoken minutes before, the expressions of the people around him, the silent looks of the waiters. He realized how cruel he had been, not by speaking out loud, but by speaking without thinking. In that simple environment, everyone seemed happy, while she, surrounded by luxury, was always dissatisfied. He looked around. A couple laughed softly, sharing a plate of fish. A mother helped her little son hold the glass of juice. A group of friends toasted with beers and sincere smiles. And she, in the midst of it all, felt out of place, like a note out of tune. Suddenly something in her began to give way. Maybe the wine, maybe the silence, maybe the shame of finally seeing herself as others saw her. But it was clear. Something was changing. When he finished his dish, he called the young waiter Raphael. The tone of his voice was no longer the same. "Sir, the risotto was good." Raphael smiled, surprised. "I'm glad you liked it, ma'am. Mr. André will be pleased too." "André?" she repeated. "The older waiter?" "Yes, ma'am. He's responsible for that dish." Viviane's eyes widened. "Him? But he's not from the kitchen." Raphael hesitated for a moment, then replied, "Not exactly, ma'am. He's special here." She frowned, puzzled. "Special?" "Yes," said the boy. "Let's just say Mr. André knows this restaurant better than any of us." Viviane remained silent, not understanding what that meant. But there was something in the respectful way Raphael spoke of the man that aroused curiosity, and for the first time, admiration. A few minutes later, André returned to the balcony to collect the dishes. Viviane watched him approach, and this time there was no arrogance in his gaze. There was a strange feeling of humility that she still couldn't name. "The dish was great," she said sincerely. "I'm sorry if I was rude earlier." André smiled without irony. I'm glad you liked it, ma'am. And you don't need to apologize to me. Sometimes the day is heavy, and we forget to look at others with lightness. She nodded, surprised by his kindness. Are you always like this? He asked. Calm, even when someone treats you badly. I try to be, he replied, because I've learned that when we respond with anger, we end up serving the same bitter dish we received. The sentence hit her hard. She looked down, embarrassed. As he collected the cutlery, Viviane watched him again. The way he walked, his calm posture, his calm tone of voice, everything about him exuded a rare, quiet dignity. Nothing about him resembled a simple waiter. There was something else. Can I ask you a question? She said impulsively. Of course. Why do you work here on the balcony and not in the main hall? Because this is where people reveal themselves, he replied. The living room shows status. The balcony shows character. She was speechless. That was not a common response. It was a philosophy of life. And for the first time, Viviane realized that she was in front of someone much bigger than she had imagined. A few minutes later, when he walked away, the little boy's mother, the same one she had humiliated earlier, approached the table. His face was calm, and his son was holding his hand. Madam, sorry to bother you. I wanted to thank you. Viviane looked at her, confused. Thank you? Why? The way the waiter handled the accident. He said no one should be ashamed of making mistakes, and I think he was right. The woman smiled and returned to the table. Viviane stared at her, completely speechless. The shame was palpable now, heavy, hot, real. I felt my face burn, my chest tighten, and deep down, I knew. The meal was delicious, but the flavor that would remain in the memory was different. The taste of humility, the taste of shame that teaches. From the counter, André watched the change in her gaze. He had seen this before, that moment when pride melts away and humanity reappears. It was the beginning of something, the kind of transformation that comes not with shouting, but with silence. That night, the arrogant woman began, little by little, to taste the true spice that was missing in her life. That night, the sea wind began to get colder. The balcony was no longer so crowded, and the sky was darkening to a deep blue, reflecting the glow of the city lights. Viviane remained seated, thoughtful. He still held the wine glass by the stem, swirling it slowly, not really paying attention. The food had been perfect, but the taste that lingered in his mouth was different, the bitter taste of one's own arrogance. As he watched the movement in the restaurant, something caught his attention. The way everyone treated André. The waiters greeted him respectfully. The customers smiled as they saw him pass by. Even the cooks looked at him with admiration. It was a kind of silent reverence that wasn't earned with money, but with something she never had. Genuine respect. A short time later, the young waiter, Raphael, returned to the table to ask if she wanted dessert. No, thank you, she replied, in a much softer tone. But can I ask you something? Of course, ma'am. That older waiter, André, how long has he been working here? Raphael smiled. He's been working here since day one. Since the inauguration? She asked, surprised. Actually, since before, he replied, choosing his words carefully. The restaurant exists because of him. Viviane's eyes widened. What do you mean, he's the... Raphael nodded discreetly. Yes, ma'am. Mr. André is the owner of Sole Sal. She was breathless for a few seconds. The cup stopped halfway to his lips. He looked around, as if expecting someone to deny it, but no one did. The waiter walked away, leaving her alone with the weight of that revelation. The memories came rushing back. The mocking laugh when he offered the simple table. The harsh words, the complaints, the disdainful look. And in every memory, there was now shame. Very shameful. She had humiliated him, without knowing that she was talking to the restaurant owner. A man who, even though he was the most important person there, treated her with patience and respect, while she treated him as someone inferior. For a few minutes, Viviane stood still, watching André from afar. He walked from table to table, helping staff, clearing dishes, talking to customers. Nothing about him betrayed arrogance. It was the kind of greatness that didn't need to be advertised, just lived. When André passed by her table, she suddenly stood up. "Mr. André," he called, his voice trembling slightly. He stopped, surprised, but smiled. "Yes, ma'am. She hesitated. "I just found out who you are." He looked at her calmly, without pretending to be surprised. "And what does that change?" The question caught her off guard. "It changes everything," he replied sincerely. "It changes the fact that I was horrible to the restaurant owner who treated me kindly." André moved a little closer, placing the cloth over his shoulder. "What if I weren't the owner?" he asked. "Would you still think you did wrong?" Viviane swallowed dryly. Her words disappeared before she even left. He looked at the floor and shook his head slowly. "No, I would have gone on with my life thinking I was right." He smiled, but there was sadness in his eyes. "Then maybe what you need to discover is not who I am, but who you want to be." That sentence pierced her like an arrow. There was no accusation in it, only truth. Viviane took a deep breath, feeling her eyes well up. "I deserved for you to have sent me away." "No," he replied, "because arrogance is like salt. In the right measure it teaches. In excess it corrodes. And today, you tasted the difference." She nodded, excited. For a few seconds he didn't know what to do. Until, with an impulsive gesture, he extended his hand. "I'm really sorry." André looked at her hand for a moment before squeezing it firmly. Forgiveness is the easiest dish to serve. The hard part is learning to savor it. Viviane smiled through her tears. "I think I finally learned." When she sat down again, the sea was already dark and the restaurant was almost empty. From the counter, André watched discreetly, not out of vanity, but out of gratitude, because she knew that night, something had changed, not just for her, but for everyone who watched. The employees commented in low voices, proudly. The story would spread through kitchens, hallways, and inevitably through the city. But what really mattered was not what would be told. That was what would be learned. Viviane, alone, looked at the horizon and realized that, for the first time in a long time, she felt small, but not in a humiliating way. Small in the face of the greatness that resides in simplicity. The restaurant was nearly empty. The last tables were finishing their orders, and the soft sound of a saxophone instrument filled the air with a pleasant melancholy. Candles flickered on the tables, reflecting in the half-filled wine glasses, and the sea outside seemed to breathe in slow, steady waves. Viviane was still sitting on the porch, deep in thought, her gaze lost in the darkness that stretched beyond the windows. Ever since he discovered that the simple waiter was, in fact, the owner of the restaurant, a sense of uneasiness had taken hold of his chest. She couldn't understand how someone with so much power, recognition, and resources could choose to serve. André was calmly collecting the last dishes when he realized she was still there. He approached with a serene smile. "Are you still here?" "Yes," she replied. "I wanted to ask you a question." He leaned the cloth against the counter, crossed his arms, and waited. "You can ask." "Why?" she said hesitantly. "Why would the owner of such a beautiful, famous restaurant prefer to disguise himself as a waiter?" André smiled, as if he had already expected that doubt. He sat across from her, keeping his tone calm and firm. "You know, Mrs. Viviane, many people think that success lies in being served, but I've learned otherwise. True success lies in never forgetting the value of service." She watched him silently, absorbing every word. He continued, "I grew up poor. I worked washing dishes in a restaurant similar to this one, back in Garopaba. I had no education, no important surname, but the owner of that place treated me with respect. One day he said to me, 'André, a restaurant isn't made of tables or menus, it's made of people.' And that phrase has stuck with me ever since." Viviane lowered her gaze. "And that's what made you create Solisal?" "Exactly," he replied. "When I finally managed to open this place, I promised myself that I would never let pride override empathy, and that every customer would be treated equally, even those who forget that we are equal." She took a deep breath. "Including me. Including you," he added with a slight smile. Because sometimes life brings difficult people just to test whether we still remember what we believe. Viviane remained silent for a few seconds. The sound of the waves filled the space between them. She then asked, "And you never tire of forgiving those who treat you badly?" "I'm tired, yes," André replied, looking out to sea. "But I've learned that when we respond with anger, the other person wins. When we respond calmly, the other person learns." She stood still, as if those words had struck a deep chord. "And do you think I learned something today?" "I think so," he replied, looking her in the eye. "You came here wanting to prove you were worth more than others. But you ended up discovering that true value doesn't come from the price of your clothes nor the table you sit at. It comes from the way you treat those who serve you." Viviane swallowed dryly. Her eyes welled up, but she tried to hide it. "I was horrible. It was human," he replied. "We all are sometimes. What matters is what we do after we realize it." She was quiet for a few seconds and then gave a slight, almost shy smile. "You should give lectures." André laughed. "I prefer to give examples. They speak louder." Viviane looked around the restaurant. For the first time, I saw something beyond the decorations and cutlery. I saw the sparkle in the employees' eyes, the joy of the customers, the silent harmony of a place that breathed respect. It all seemed so far removed from the cold, competitive world he lived in, where success came quickly and pride came as a gift. "I think I really needed to be here today," she said, "to remember what I had forgotten." "And what was it?" asked André. "That being kind is not about lowering yourself. It's about elevating yourself." André nodded, satisfied. "Then my night was worth it." She finished the wine slowly, unhurriedly, savoring each sip as if she wanted to capture the moment. When she got up, André insisted on accompanying her to the exit. At the door, she turned and asked, "Do you always work undercover like this?" "Once a week," he replied, smiling. "It's my reminder." "Reminder?" "That, success that distances humanity is not success at all. It is loneliness by another name." Viviane stood still for a moment, unable to respond. Then he extended his hand again, this time firmly and humbly. "Thank you, really." "Come back any time, Mrs. Viviane," he replied. "And next time, choose any table. Here, they all have the same sea view." She smiled. But this time, it was a sincere smile. When she left the restaurant, the night was cold, but there was a new warmth within her. A kind of, peace that didn't come from status, nor from applause, but from something simpler and more difficult, recognizing one's own mistake. And for the first time in a long time, Viviane felt proud of the person she was becoming. In the following days, something curious began to happen in the Sol et Sal restaurant. Nothing had changed in the structure of the place, the same tables, the same tablecloths, the same menu. But the environment seemed different. It was as if a new energy circulated between the employees and customers, a kind of silent lightness. And it all started with Viviane Cardoso. She had returned. 3 days after that night that had transformed her, she walked through the same glass door again, but without the sunglasses, without the designer bag on her arm, and, most importantly, without the look of superiority. André noticed her from afar, but said nothing. He just smiled discreetly and continued serving a table. He was Raphael, the young waiter, who approached. "Good afternoon." "Mrs. Viviane, how nice to see you again." "Good afternoon, Raphael," she replied kindly. "Could you please put me on the balcony?" The boy blinked in surprise. "On the balcony?" "Yes," she confirmed, smiling. "It's my favorite place now." When he sat down, he looked around. The same families, the same couples, the same children running around. But this time, he saw no disorder or discomfort. It saw life. While he waited, he ordered a coffee and watched the staff. He noticed that André, even though he was the owner, was helping to wait tables again. Raphael arranged dishes with an almost artistic attention. And the boy's mother, whom she had previously scolded, was there again, this time as a regular customer. They exchanged a brief nod. No apology was spoken aloud, but the gesture was enough. Over time, customers began to notice the change in Viviane. She smiled at the waiters, thanked them, and praised the service. And what seemed like just an individual gesture became a collective. Reflection. Other customers, who previously barely looked the attendants in the eye, began to do the same. A thank you, a good job, a sincere smile. André observed everything with the serenity of someone who plants and finally sees the harvest bloom. Did you know that small actions create waves, and waves, when they spread, can even change the sea? One afternoon, when the movement had died down, Viviane approached the counter. "André, can I ask you something?" "Of course, ma'am." "I wanted to pay the bill for a table, but without them knowing it was me." He raised his eyebrows curiously. "And may I know the reason?" Viviane discreetly pointed to the table where her mother and little boy were eating dinner. "Let's say it's a way of saying thank you for a lesson I learned in the most beautiful way possible." André smiled, his eyes full of pride. "You have no idea how much this means." "I can imagine," she replied. "Because if a disguised waiter can change the way I see the world, then a simple gesture can change someone's day too." That night, before leaving, Viviane walked to the counter and left an envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. "To everyone at Soleil, thank you for teaching me that humility has no address or price. You serve much more than food. You serve humanity. Viviane." André read silently, and for a moment the restaurant seemed even more alive. The sound of cutlery, conversations, and the waves in the background mixed with a feeling that was difficult to describe, the certainty that something good had been restored to the world. Viviane's story began to spread among loyal customers. No one knew her full name, but everyone was talking about the woman on the balcony, the one who had come back different. And without realizing it, she had become an example. Not an example of power or wealth, but of something that has become rare. Recognize one's own mistake with dignity. One Thursday night, as she was paying the bill, Raphael said something that made her smile wide. "You know, Miss Viviane, Mr. André always says that each client teaches something. But this time, I think it was you who taught us all." She held back her emotions and replied, "Then we're even." Outside, the cold coastal wind enveloped her. Viviane looked back one last time. The lights of the sun and salt reflected in the sea like little stars. And for a moment, she realized that this place wasn't just a restaurant. It was a mirror where the ego was undone and the heart finally saw itself. 2 weeks had passed since their reunion, Viviane and André, and the restaurant sun and salt was busier than ever. But this time, the reason wasn't just the refined menu or the stunning sea view, the story. The news about the owner disguised as a waiter who taught an arrogant customer a lesson spread like wildfire on social media. Someone who was present that night had discreetly recorded a snippet of the discussion between Viviane and André, the moment when he calmly said, "You need to discover who you want to be, not just who you are." The video went viral. Within days, it had accumulated thousands of views, shares, and emotional comments. People across the country praised André's patience, Viviane's humility and change, and the power of a simple attitude based on respect. One morning, while André was organizing the salon before opening, he received a call. It was from a reporter from TV Floripa, interested in telling their story. "Mr. André, we'd like to do a story about Sol et Sal. Your story is inspiring a lot of people." André hesitated. "I didn't like exposure." But after thinking for a few seconds, he replied, "If it's to remind people of the value of respect, then it's worth it." The interview was scheduled for the following Saturday, and by his choice, Viviane would also be invited. When the day arrived, the restaurant was closed to the public in the morning. The cameras were positioned on the balcony, the same place where it all began. Viviane arrived punctually, dressed simply and with a discreet smile. "I still wonder why you wanted me to be a part of this," she said, adjusting the microphone. "Because people need to see that change is possible," André replied. "And no one represents that better than you." The reporter Clara Noguera approached and started recording. The sea in the background created a natural setting, and the light breeze seemed to punctuate each sentence spoken with sincerity. "Mr. André, what motivated you to work undercover as a waiter in your own restaurant?" Clara asked. He smiled calmly. "I wish I never forgot where I came from. When you're successful, it's easy to distance yourself from ordinary people, but it's from them that the meaning of all this comes." "And what did you learn from this experience?" "That respect is the seasoning that is missing from the world's table." Clara then turned to Viviane. "And you? What did you learn from this story?" Viviane took a deep breath before answering. "That sometimes we think we're on top, but in reality, we're lost. I needed to be humbled by my own arrogance to understand that no one is too small to be treated with dignity." Silence took over for a few seconds. Even the technical team was moved. During the recording, André talked about the social project of Sun and Salt, which offered free dinners once a month to local fishermen and vulnerable families. Viviane listened to him attentively, and at a certain point, intervened. "Can I help with this project?" André turned around, surprised. "Help how?" "I want to sponsor the events and also participate. Serving, if you allow." André's eyes lit up. "Serving?" "Yes," she said, smiling. "I think it's time to trade in high heels for an apron." Everyone laughed, but there was genuine emotion in that laughter. When the interview ended, Clara turned off the microphone and approached the two. "I've interviewed business people, politicians, artists, but I've rarely seen anything like this," she said. "This story will touch a lot of people." And she was right. When the program aired on Sunday, social media was filled with messages from people saying they had cried, that they recognized themselves in Viviane, that they had decided to change the way they treated their servants. Some restaurants have even adopted André's phrase on their walls: "Respect is the seasoning that cannot be missing from any dish." In the following days, Sol et Sal became a humble tourist spot. But André remained the same, simple, serene, and, every Thursday, still waiting tables on the veranda. Viviane, now an active volunteer, helped with charitable activities and became a close friend of the team. The employees, previously intimidated by her, now treated her with affection, and when someone asked why she kept coming back, Viviane would respond with a calm smile. "Because here, I learned to be a person again." Outside, the local TV camera captured the last image. André and Viviane side by side, serving dishes to a table of smiling children. No speeches, no scripts, just gestures. And in that simplicity, the public understood everything they needed to. The sun was slowly setting over the sea, tinting the sky with orange and pink hues. It was the end of another busy day at Sol et Sal restaurant, and Viviane was helping the waiters clear plates and fold napkins. She wore a simple apron and a makeshift bun, nothing like the arrogant woman from weeks ago. And yet, there was a new elegance about her, made of serenity and purpose. While cleaning a table near the balcony, she heard Raphael call her from reception. "Mrs. Viviane, there is someone who wants to speak to you." She frowned, puzzled, and walked to the entrance. There, standing, was a woman of about 50 in a cleaning lady's uniform, holding a bag in her hands. Her eyes widened when she saw Viviane, and the astonishment was mutual. "Marta?" Viviane asked, almost in disbelief. The woman smiled. Shyly. "Me too. It's been a while, huh?" Viviane was silent for a moment. The past had just knocked on her door. Martha, she had been her employee years ago, when Viviane still managed a luxury clothing store in São Paulo, and she remembered very well the day he had unfairly fired her after humiliating her in front of everyone for a minor mistake. The air seemed to grow heavier. Viviane took a hesitant step forward. "What are you doing here?" "I came to visit my daughter," Marta replied simply. "She works in the restaurant kitchen. She told me there was a Viviane helping out here. I thought it was a coincidence, until I saw you." Viviane felt the ground disappear for a moment. Fate had a cruel or kind way of bringing people together at the exact moment they were ready to settle accounts with the past. "Marta, she began, but her voice broke. "I need to apologize." The woman gave a small but sincere smile. I figured you'd say that. The two sat at one of the empty tables on the porch. The sound of the waves filled the silences between words. Viviane looked at her hands nervously. Back then, I thought being a boss meant giving orders. That authority came from fear, and you ended up paying for it. I remember, Marta said softly. But I also remember a lost girl, trying to appear strong in a world that only respects those who shout the loudest. Viviane looked at her, moved. I had no right to treat you that way. I was someone else. I know, Marta replied. And, look, I already forgave you a long time ago. Did you forgive me? She asked, surprised. Yes, she said calmly, because when we hold a grudge, it's not the past that rots. It's the heart. The tears came without resistance. Viviane held her hand, moved. Marta, I wish I could go back in time and fix everything. No need, the woman replied. You already fixed it. Like this? Marta discreetly pointed inside the restaurant. The whole kitchen is talking about you. They say you treat everyone equally, that you help, that you listen, that you even wash dishes when necessary. She smiled. The woman I knew before wouldn't do any of that. Viviane took a deep breath, trying to contain her tears. I think André taught me more about leadership than all my years at the company. He's a special man, Marta replied. But you know what else is beautiful? That you let the teachings sink in. André, who had been watching from afar, approached slowly. He didn't want to interrupt, he just listened to the end of the conversation. Viviane saw him and smiled through her tears. André, this is Marta. She worked with me years ago. He greeted the woman with a firm handshake. It's a pleasure to meet you. You raised an incredible daughter, by the way. Marta laughed proudly. Luana? Oh, she loves this restaurant. She's always saying that the owner here seems more like a teacher than a boss. André returned the smile. Here, we believe that teaching is serving. Marta nodded. So, that's why everyone speaks well of it. Before leaving, Marta held Viviane's hands. I'm happy to see you like this, he said. Life takes turns, my daughter. Sometimes you have to fall off your pedestal to find the ground. Viviane smiled through her tears. And it's on the ground that we learn to walk properly, right? Exactly, Marta replied. And when we learn, the world becomes a lighter place. The two hugged each other. A long, sincere hug, full of forgiveness and new beginnings. André, in the background, watched the scene with a sparkle in his eyes. I knew the cycle was closing, not by coincidence, but by merit. When Marta said goodbye and left, Viviane stood looking at the sea. The wind blew her hair, and the sound of the waves seemed like a silent prayer. She smiled. She knew that finally the past had bowed before the new version of her, and in that moment he realized something simple and profound. Forgiveness doesn't change what happened, but it changes who we are. Afterwards, the full moon shone over the sea, reflecting a silvery band that seemed to connect the sky to the Sol et Sal restaurant. That night, the room was different. No crystal glasses, no expensive tablecloths, or fancy dishes. The simple tables were decorated with wildflowers, and in place of the regulars there were fishermen, local workers, humble families, and children, with eyes full of curiosity. It was the restaurant's first charity dinner, a free event organized by André and Viviane, to offer not just food, but dignity. And no one imagined that that moment would become a symbol of everything they had experienced. Viviane wore a white apron with the restaurant's logo hand-embroidered on it. I was at the counter, helping to assemble dishes while André coordinated the team. The aroma of fresh fish, coconut rice, and grilled vegetables wafted through the air, mingling with the sound of laughter and cheerful conversation. When the doors opened, André was the first to greet the guests. "Welcome," he said, smiling. "Today, Sol et Sal is all yours." People entered timidly, some looking at the chandeliers, others at the dishes, as if they couldn't believe they were actually being welcomed. Viviane watched everything with teary eyes. The same balcony where she had once refused to sit was now occupied by people she would have ignored in the past. And for the first time, she understood the meaning of the phrase that André always repeated. Here, every table has the same value. The children laughed. The waiters, many of them volunteers, served the dishes with joy. Viviane walked between the tables, asking if everyone was satisfied. A lady held his hand and said, "God bless you, my daughter. It's been a while since I ate in a place like this. It's been a while since I felt human." Viviane swallowed dryly. Those simple words were worth more than any compliment from a wealthy client he had ever received in his life. She looked at André, who was watching her from afar, and the two exchanged a knowing look, the kind of look that says 1,000 words. During dinner, a small local band began playing guitar and accordion. People got up to dance, laughed, sang, and the restaurant, for a few moments, seemed to float in an atmosphere of pure joy. In the midst of this, Raphael, the young waiter, approached André. "Boss, can I say something?" "Of course. I always thought you were just a good guy, but today I realized you're a teacher." André smiled, looking at the scene in front of him. "So, Raphael, do you want to know the secret?" "I want. To teach is to serve, and to serve is to love." Raphael nodded, moved. Later, Viviane picked up the makeshift microphone that was on the counter. Everyone fell silent. "I wanted to thank you," she began, her voice breaking. "Not only those who came, but those who believed." She looked at the guests and continued. "A while ago, I came here as a woman who thought respect could be bought. Today, I know that respect is earned and given." Some people applauded, others just smiled, touched by the sincerity. Viviane took a deep breath and concluded, "May this dinner not just be food, but a reminder. The world needs more tables like this, where everyone can sit without fear of not belonging." André applauded along with the others. Then he came closer and placed his hand on her shoulder. "I told you that you would teach a lot of people." Viviane smiled. "I didn't teach you anything, André. I just learned to listen." They laughed, and as dinner progressed, Andrew looked around and saw all he had built, not in walls or profits, but in people. Every smile, every hug, every grateful look was a confirmation that the Sun and Salted wasn't just a restaurant. It was a space for reunion, with others and with oneself. Toward the end of the evening, Marta, Viviane's former employee, arrived with her daughter Luana, helping serve desserts. Viviane went to them, hugged them both, and said, "Thank you for being here. You remind me every day that it's never too late to start over." Marta responded in the same sweet tone as always. And that forgiveness is the missing ingredient in many of life's recipes. Viviane smiled. André in the background heard the sentence and murmured softly, "That's why today's food is perfect." When the event ended, only a few lit candles and the sound of the waves remained. Viviane and André were alone on the balcony, watching the sea. Neither of them spoke for a while. There was, no need. The silence there was not emptiness, it was fullness. And in that instant they both understood something profound. True nobility is not in being served, but in serving with an open heart. The years passed, but the Solisal restaurant continued to be a beacon of humanity by the sea. Time has transformed the place into more than just a gastronomic tourist spot. It has become a symbol of respect and empathy. Anyone who entered immediately noticed a carved wooden sign at the entrance, illuminated by soft light. Respect is the seasoning that cannot be missing from any dish. This phrase, engraved in the hearts of so many, was now the motto not only of the restaurant, but also of the people who visited it. Viviane Cardoso had completely changed his life. After that first charity dinner, she officially began working alongside André, helping organize charity events and manage the restaurant, not for status but for purpose. Always dressed in the same white apron, she became a beloved figure among employees and customers. Many didn't even know who she once was. They only saw the kind woman who helped serve, smiled with her eyes, and treated everyone the same. And interestingly, that was how she wanted to be remembered. André, now a little older, walked with slow but firm steps. His gaze carried the serenity of someone who found the meaning of life in the simple act of service. He watched Viviane from afar, with silent pride. He knew that by helping her see the value of humility, he had also reaffirmed his own faith in people. "André," called Raphael, now the restaurant manager. "The children from the NGO are already arriving for dinner." He smiled. "Then it's time to turn on the lights." The balcony was filled with happy voices again, just like on that first night of solidarity. The wind carried the smell of the sea, mixed with the aroma of lemon rice and grilled fish, the restaurant's most popular dish. Viviane walked between the tables, helping the little ones to settle down. A girl of about 8 years old pulled on his sleeve and asked, "Young lady, is it true that you were rich and bossy before?" The question made her laugh. And truth. And why did it change? Viviane thought for a moment and replied sweetly, "Because I realized that ordering is easy. Serving is difficult." The girl smiled and went back to eating. André, who had been listening from afar, just nodded, satisfied. That sentence showed how much she had learned. Later, when the crowds had died down, the two sat side by side on the same porch where it all began. The sea was calm, and the moon's reflection drew a silver path over the waves. For a few minutes they were silent, just watching. "You know, André," Viviane said softly, "sometimes I still remember that night. How I came in here thinking I was better than everyone else." "And what do you feel when you remember?" he asked. "Gratitude," she replied. "Because if it weren't for that humiliation, I would never have discovered true value." André smiled, looking at the horizon. "Mistakes are the beginning of all change. Only those who have the courage to see themselves as small learn." Viviane nodded, moved. "I think it was the sea that taught me that too. It's immense, but it never stops touching the sand." André laughed. "And that's why Soli Sal will continue to exist even after we're gone, because it reminds people to touch the ground, and their hearts." When everyone had left, only the soft lights of the hall remained on. In the center of the balcony, a table was set with 2 glasses and a plate of risotto, the same dish that had changed everything years ago. It wasn't decoration. It was a souvenir. Raphael turned off the lights in the hall and left only the illuminated sign at the entrance. It shimmered in the night breeze, like a silent whisper to anyone passing by on the sidewalk. And there it was written, in golden letters, the summary of an entire story. Serving is an act of love, and, love is the greatest banquet a human being can offer. True greatness is not in being served, but in serving with the heart. Respect transforms the simple into the extraordinary, and those who learn to be humble discover the flavor of life in every gesture of empathy.